Hello everyone, it's Mr. Smith, your 8th grade U.S. history teacher, here with another day of notes. Today we'll be covering Chapter 2, Section 1. Before we get into Chapter 2, I really want to look at what was Chapter 1 all about. So if you remember, Chapter 1 really talked about how did people get to the New World, or how did people get to North and South America? What were the culture of these different groups living in North and South America? Then we branched over to what was the Silk Road and how did trade impact different cultures? Well, they spread different cultures by sharing their beliefs, their stories, and also trading their spices and their different goods from different regions around the world. And then we talked about different forms of government that were found in Europe. So Athenian democracy, Roman republics, feudalism, and eventually made our way to this new topic of this age of exploration. And that's where we ended Chapter 1. Chapter 2 is really going to pick up where Chapter 1 left off. So today's notes, Chapter 2, Section 1, is going to discuss key explorers that explored parts of the New World, what they were looking for, and whether or not they achieved and found what they were looking for. So today's going to be Chapter 2, Section 1. Let's get to it. Alright, CNN student news. You are probably watching this video because either you were absent one day or because you're watching this for a review for an upcoming quiz or test. So I'm not going to ask you to go out of your way and try to find and watch CNN Student News. If you want to know what the topics were, you can ask me in class. If you want to know how to find it, you can just Google CNN Student News and it'll pull it right up. But again, you do not have to go and watch it for the sake of this video. Alright, so in class we watched CNN Student News, learned current events going on in the world around us. Then we're going to cover about 20 minutes worth of notes. Then you have a Columbus, hero, or crook source analysis. So what you're going to do during that is you're going to break down two different images of Columbus and decide which perspective do you believe is the most historically accurate. Then your race response will be based off of that Columbus, hero, or crook source analysis and also the notes that we're going to get into right now. Alright, so we have three essential questions that we really want to have answered by the end of class today. The first question is, how did voyages of Spanish explorers impact Europe and the known world? Question 2 is, where did these explorers travel? And 3, how were the explorations of these explorers historically significant? In a nutshell, how did explorers sail around the world, specifically Spanish, and why do we care? So that's what we're really getting into today. And by the end of class, you should be able to do two different things. You should be able to identify and explain the reasons for Spanish exploration and colonization of the New World. And you should be able to compare and contrast the historical impact of explorers, specifically Columbus, during this age of exploration. Alright, data trackers we've already covered in class, so we're going to skip past this. We basically just put in your data tracker where your quiz score was from the Chapter 1 quiz. Alright, first visitors from Europe. So on your notes page, you should have a tree map. The very first tree branch that should say first visitors from Europe. Anything in yellow, again, needs written down in that box. Okay, so to really discuss who are the first visitors from Europe in the New World, we actually really have to talk about a group that we've never talked about before, the Vikings. So Vikings were this group of people from Scandinavia, and they're really thought to be the first people that really discovered America. And there are ruins that were found in 1963 on Vinland that were thought to have been constructed and created by Leif Erikson or Eric the Red's son. So basically these Vikings that lived in Iceland, Greenland, that area, traveled across, found North America, and then basically left it and didn't set up established settlements. Either they forgot about it or they just didn't journey back for different reasons, maybe for food scarcity. For whatever reason, the Vikings never went back. However, Columbus is not the first person to discover America or to discover the New World. It was the Vikings. Okay? Columbus really discovers it a lot later. So Columbus, or Cristobal Colombo, is this Italian explorer who thought that he could travel west across the Atlantic and find a faster route to Asia. So if you remember, when we talked about the age of exploration, we talked about the Prince of Portugal and how he set up, Henry the Navigator, set up this school for navigation. Columbus goes to Portugal first, and Columbus says, "Hey, Portugal, I think I found a faster route to Asia than sailing down around Africa and then back up Africa and then sailing across the Indian Ocean to India." Columbus gets denied by the King of Portugal. They basically say, "No, we don't care. We're sailing around Africa. It's a fast and safe enough route, so we're going to keep sailing that way." So Columbus goes to the King and Queen of Spain, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and he basically goes up to the King and Queen of Spain and says, "Hey, if you fund this voyage, I will find a faster route to Asia, and then guess what, King and Queen of Spain? You get all the credit, and you get all the glory, and you get all the gold that I'll bring back on or from my trip to Asia." And so King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain actually fund his voyage in 1492. They give Columbus 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And on October 12th, he's going to sail across, and he's actually going to land at Waiting Island in the Bahamas. This island that he sails to and lands on October 12th of 1492, he claims for the King and Queen of Spain. So even though Columbus is an Italian explorer, because he was paid for by the King and Queen of Spain, he claims that land or that island in the Bahamas for Spain. So Columbus is going to explore this area of Cuba. He, because it's an island, thought it was Japan. And so he's going to explore this land that he's going to believe to be the Asian islands, and he's going to meet a group of Native Americans that he's going to call the Indies, because he thought he also landed in part of India. And so these Native Americans, or these Indians, as he's going to call them, from the Indies, he thinks are actually Asian individuals, but they're not. They are Native Americans in North America, not, like Columbus thought, in Asia. So the King and Queen of Spain fund this voyage. Columbus sails out in 1492, lands on the Waiting Island on October 12th of 1492, and really just kind of explores around, meets Native Americans, calls them the Indies, because again, Columbus thought he landed in Asia when he really hadn't. He landed in basically the Caribbean Sea and the islands in or near the Gulf of Mexico, near Cuba and places like that. Alright, so Columbus goes back to Spain, and being the guy that he is, he reports that there is a surplus of gold in the land that he's going to call the West Indies. So he thinks he's in the western part of India, and so these Indians, or these Native Americans, he says there's a surplus of gold that these Native Americans have. And so the King and Queen of Spain, thinking, wow, there must be vast resources in this West Indies area, this part of Asia that Columbus has discovered, the King and Queen of Spain are going to give him more ships and more men, and he's going to sail back across the Atlantic Ocean and land on those islands in the Caribbean Sea. So in September 1493, with 17 ships and 17,000 men, Columbus goes back to the West Indies. On this second trip to the West Indies, Columbus is going to discover places like Puerto Rico, but he's going to do way more than just discover land, thinking and hoping that he's going to find all this gold. So what Columbus really does in Puerto Rico is he enslaves Native Americans looking for gold. So he really captures them and forces them to do his bidding so that he can find this golden land or this surplus of gold that's somewhere stored in these islands in the Atlantic Ocean and near the Caribbean Sea. Columbus is going to go back, and he's going to come back again. He's going to go back to Spain and then come back again. So he's going to make 4 different voyages to basically the islands around South America in the Caribbean Sea. He again is going to think that he's made it to Asia, but he is dead wrong. Columbus is actually going to die thinking, after his 4th voyage, that he landed in Asia. He thinks he's found this faster route to Asia, when in fact, he's just discovered new islands that are very close to North and South America, 2 new continents on the Western Hemisphere. So even though he didn't find a faster route to Asia, Columbus really finds a gold mine of land that people can take from the Native Americans, as much as it stinks for the Native Americans, and they're going to find resources like some gold, but also different types of food and fruits and things like that. And we'll get more into that in just another minute. Okay, so after Columbus really makes his first few voyages, other explorers from Spain go across the Atlantic Ocean westward, finding what they think are faster routes to Asia. And so this one explorer, Amerigo Vespucci, he is going to make 2 trips, and he's going to land in North America. He is going to bring with him a German map maker or cartographer, and the map maker is going to label this land that Amerigo Vespucci is discovering the land of Amerigo, aka America. So America, North and South America, are labeled after this explorer, Amerigo Vespucci. Lots of times people think Columbus named it. It wasn't Columbus. It was Amerigo Vespucci's map maker who just happened to name the land that they were exploring the land of Amerigo. So that's where we get the name North and South America from, Amerigo. A couple years after Columbus's journeys in 1510, Spain is going to send another explorer, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, and he's going to explore the jungles of Panama. Panama is this tiny country in Mesoamerica that connects Mesoamerica to South America. It actually has an isthmus in it, meaning it's a thin strip of land that connects 2 larger continents. Panama is going to be very valuable because what these explorers start looking for is basically a route across the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And so when Balboa goes across these jungles of Panama, he's actually going to be one of the first people to see the Pacific Ocean. Or one of the first Europeans to see the Pacific Ocean. And so Balboa goes back and basically tells everyone he's seen the Pacific Ocean, he's seen this vast new waterway, and there might be another way to get to Asia from there. And so in 1519, about 9 years later, another explorer by the name of Ferdinand Magellan, is going to go look for something called a strait, or basically a narrow passage of water that's going to connect the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Magellan's hoping that it's going to be somewhere near Panama, but he sails down around South America and basically realizes there's no strait until you get to the very southern part of South America. And so he sails down around South America and then up along South America along the western coast and then across the Pacific Ocean. However, the Pacific Ocean is very, very large. And so one problem that Ferdinand Magellan runs into is that as his crew is sailing down around South America and across the Pacific Ocean, they're going to run out of food. They're going to run out of supplies because they misjudged the distance of sailing across this Pacific Ocean because, again, no one's really ever sailed across the Pacific Ocean. So they didn't know how much food and water to drink and bring. So what they do is, when they reach the Philippine Islands in Asia, there's going to be a mutiny. And these Philippine Island individuals are actually going to kill Magellan and a bunch of his crew members. And only a few members, 15 members, of Magellan's crew is actually going to sail back across the Indian Ocean and then across Africa, up across the Atlantic Ocean. And they are going to make their way to Portugal. So these Portuguese explorers are going to be the first people to actually having circumnavigated or traveled around the entire world. But at a great cost, because Magellan's killed on this journey of sailing all the way around the entire world. Also note, Magellan is a Portuguese explorer, not a Spanish explorer. So the Spanish kept having explorers like Columbus, Vespucci, and Vasco Núñez de Balboa come back and say, hey, this is what's going on in the New World. This is what we're finding. This is what we're seeing. And so Portugal felt like they could take up the torch, basically, and find a faster route to Asia across this new world that the Spanish had really discovered and were exploring. Or, rediscovered, because the Vikings were the first ones to actually discover the New World in the first place. Okay, so Columbus is really known for finding islands in the Caribbean Sea and islands in the Atlantic Ocean. He's also known for something kind of great, but also kind of not super great because of the negative connotations and the negative aspects connected with something called the Columbian Exchange. And the Columbian Exchange is really this Spanish colonization that's going to lead to a trade network of people, goods, ideas, and diseases from the old world to the new world. So essentially what's going to happen is items from the old world like grapes, turnips, onions, sugarcane, bananas, they are all going to be taken to the new world and planted there. And then people from Europe are going to bring new goods and new resources like avocados, pumpkins, turkeys, squash, pineapple to Europe and start growing those new goods or those new plants, those new crops in the new world. This seems great. This seems like what could be so wrong with the Columbian Exchange, because they're trading different crops and they're having new foods put into their diet, new fruits and vegetables, new types of meats with turkey. What could possibly be wrong with this Columbian Exchange? And it's really disease. So what Europeans are going to do during the Middle Ages, during the bubonic plague or the Black Death, Europeans began to grow immunities to different diseases. And so these Europeans that had lived through all of these different diseases were basically immune or couldn't as easily get these diseases like smallpox, the flu, typhus, measles, and things like that. And so what they do in the Columbian Exchange, as they came to the New World, unintentionally, the Europeans are actually spreading these diseases with Native Americans that had never ever been in contact with these diseases that the Europeans became immune to. And so what happens during the Columbian Exchange is that diseases like smallpox are going to spread to Native Americans and kill them by the thousands. So even though the Columbian Exchange seems great because Native Americans are gaining new crops and different types of foods, and then Europeans are gaining different crops and new types of food, it's really not super great because thousands of Native Americans are dying because of the diseases that these Europeans are unintentionally and accidentally bringing over from Europe to the New World. All right, so we've done our notes for the day. I want you to look at, for your Columbus hero or crook source analysis, look at the source questions. Then look at the sources. It's 2 pictures. I want you to go ahead and break down these source pictures. So view Columbus. How is Columbus viewed in source 1? How is Columbus viewed in source 2? Then answer the questions in complete sentences. To end class today, you're going to have a Columbus hero or crook race response. So using the information from your sources, from your notes, you're going to write an answer to the following race response questions. So, how should historians remember the voyages of Christopher Columbus? Which portrayal of Christopher Columbus do you believe is the most accurate? So take this time, answer fully and completely this race response question, and until next time, Mr. Smith out.